Let's have a look at what went down at the Italian Open in Rome. It wasn't just all about Sinner meeting the Pope last week. We actually did have tennis to play. And yeah, Sinner was in the final. He had almost a fairy tale comeback, but couldn't go all the way because Carlos Alcaraz stopped him in straight sets in the final 7-6, 6-1 to defeat Jannik Sinner. And with this win, Alcaraz has become the first player of the season to win 3 titles this year. And he's also managed to get a second clay court masters this season. I think he's the first person since Rafa going into Roland-Garros having snapped up more than one of the clay masters. So he's peaking maybe at the right time going into Roland-Garros. But my first question to you both is this particular match. We've got the Alcaraz Sinner, this new kind of burgeoning rivalry, which is already becoming a little bit of a mini classic. What did you make of their encounter this time around? Obviously, Sinner coming back after 3 months off, Alcaraz looking to kind of assert himself, and obviously doing so. But Joe, I'm going to come to you first. What did you make
Ooh.
of this clash on Sunday?
Um, I think from a tennis point of view, I think we've seen better performances from both players in their rivalry, and I think it took both players a bit of time to kind of get used to conditions. I felt like in the first several games there was a lot of kind of mistiming. We didn't really get into kind of extended epic rallies that I think everyone was hoping and wishing for. So I think from a kind of a fan point of view, maybe there was a little bit left in terms of kind of to be desired going into the French Open, which I don't think is any bad thing. But I think regardless, having them to get to the final with all the stuff that's gone on so far this season, it just reminds me, or it just makes me think, it's like we have literally just gone back to and reverted to like before, and it's almost like normal order is resumed because we've got Sinner and Alcaraz in a Masters 1000 final.
Yeah, it has very much become the standard proceedings again. I suppose we've had a couple of maybe surprise winners and finalists along the season,
Mm.
but in Sinner's absence. But yeah, it was very much the top two back in action, almost doing what they do best. Yeah, not the best match they've had, perhaps, but doing enough for Alcaraz to come through. Obviously, Sinner was on a win streak. He was at 26 matches for his win streak. Obviously, that stat kind of fell off my radar because he's had this absence, but Alcaraz being the first player to end that. But yeah, Chris, going forwards, I mean, where do you think Sinner? How do you think Sinner firstly will be feeling getting to this final, not quite getting the job done, but having some great wins across the course of the week, especially hate to mention it, that thrashing of Casper Ruud. How do you think he'll be feeling, now that Rome's kind of drawn to a close?
I think he'll be pleased that Rome is behind him now. I think obviously he'd have loved to win the title, but you can't always get everything that you want. When I think he probably did get a lot of what he wanted from the suspension being quite favourable to him. So coming back and winning, I think that probably, although it would have been great for him, I think it would have certainly not let this story around his suspension die. So I think it's good for him that he can move on from this now. I think it's also positive that he has got match practice in because he did need it. He's had some pretty topsy-turvy clashes this week, from winning, love and one to, losing a set 6-1 to Tommy Paul. It's been a
Yeah.
bit all over the shop. So he's got a lot of match time in, a lot of different situations he had to get himself out of. And it all came down to that first set, really. If he'd have taken those set points, I do think he probably would have maybe won it. I think it's always a case that those those close sets can then lead to the result going one way, and it was pretty one-sided in that second set. So I think he'll be focused on the fact that he did get to the final of a Masters on clay. He hasn't won a clay Masters before, so that is a big achievement for him. Obviously not the biggest achievement of his career because he's won Grand Slams, but it's notable. I do think that he didn't really get it done at the net, and I think that's going to be key if they do clash in Paris because Alcaraz was getting everything back as well as kind of hitting that forehand with such a high spin rotation that when he did get to the net, it was almost like he felt more pressure to finish there, whereas Alcaraz had that magic at the net on some of those big moments. So there's room to improve in some areas. I think there were quite a few unforced errors in that second set from Sinner, but there has been a few moments where he has lost his focus. So a positive week, and I think we're setting ourselves up for a very entertaining and very open Roland Garros.
Yeah, it's interesting that Sinner's not won a clay Masters yet because Alcaraz has become only the fifth player actually to win all the clay court masters that exist. He joins Rafa, Novak, Gustavo Kuerten, and Marcelo Rios as being only
And
the
Pablo
fifth player to
Cuevas,
have
no,
done that. Not Pablo Cuevas,
and the Pope.
sadly. So Alcaraz very much, has a lot more of the sort of clay history under his boots already. Going into the French Open, do you think that's come slightly too soon for Sinner? Has he done enough here to kind of get him to a point of being comfortable at Roland-Garros, able to probably get to the final with ease, and maybe Alcaraz being the only person likely to be able to beat him? Does Alcaraz go in as the favorite just based on this match,
Oh,
Joel?
yeah, I think with Jannik Sinner, I think even though he's obviously had time off, he can still train and be physically fit, and I think we saw that. I think we saw that in Rome. So I don't necessarily think the fact that we're going to be bumped up to best of five at the French Open is going to be a big impact on Sinner. Having said that, I do think Alcaraz is playing the better tennis, and he does go in as the favourite. I think his game is more complete on a clay court, and it was interesting to hear Tim Henman on commentary talk about. They're both very comfortable moving from side to side at the back of the court. And arguably, maybe Sinner has a better A game from back there than Alcaraz. But the reality is that Alcaraz, when he's moving forward and backwards towards the net, he is a lot more comfortable than Sinner. And you got to think with Alcaraz, in terms of the variety he can play with, that drop shot, I think that is going to be quite important in this rivalry on the clay courts because of Sinner's movement and maybe his tentativeness at the net. So it'll be interesting to see if that gets deployed a little bit more, because I felt like that was not on show as much as it could be. But it was certainly interesting that the touch aspect, the close quarters aspect, I think favoured Alcaraz. But yeah, I think for that reason, movement, a bit more variety, I think, in stroke play, I think you've got to give the edge to Alcaraz at the moment.
And he has obviously been playing more tennis and he's been winning more on the clay. And I think it's also a case where when opponents get more balls back, and Jannik's obviously a big hitter, I think he's not going for quite as big a shot. The backhand down the line was not quite the weapon that it is on some of the hard courts from what we've seen from Jannik. And I think I've actually watched him play at Rome before, and he doesn't take it on as much on clay. I think it does leave yourself a lot more open to again being taken out wide and then opening up the court. So I think it's interesting because he's such a good mover, as you say, but there were quite a lot of those drop shots which he didn't even get kind of a racket to. Whereas, I mean, Alcaraz gets a racket on everything. So it's that one extra ball. But Kim, based on what you've seen, do you think we could be on track for a Sinner Alcaraz final? They're on separate halves of the draw.
Every tournament Sinner Alcaraz plays now, we're just going to be like, is it going to end in Sinner versus Alcaraz?
Now they're 1 and 2. We can say it, Joel. Finally.
That's true.
The expectation. Yeah, I think that is the expectation. I think a lot of fans will be hoping for that.
I mean, there was not a seat. There was not a seat available, was there? On the court on Sunday. It was a real spectacle, and it was like, oh, tennis. It did feel to me like, oh, tennis is back.
I mean, Alcaraz has won, I think, the last 3 or 4 in their head-to-head. Definitely the last 3. So, probably goes in as the favourite if they were to meet in the final. But I think it would remain to be seen how physically fit they may be, what they battle throughout the course of the 2 weeks to get there. We're getting probably too far ahead of ourselves because things can happen all of a sudden to throw people's plans off. So, but I think, yeah, all being well, that's the final we're going to get. I mean, we were talking about the likes of Casper Ruud, weren't we, before? But I mean, he got thrashed in Rome, and I have to say that really doesn't bode well should he come up against a Sinner at the French. I mean, it really wasn't his best day, was it, Chris?
No, I mean, it was probably one of the best performances we've seen from Jannik Sinner. But at the same time, I was thinking this does just show the level of the rest of the field in comparison, because, Ruud was winning a Masters title, and you'd have to think if Sinner was there, he wouldn't have lost to Casper Ruud along the way. Obviously, there are other players, he said, who can cause upsets along the way. It could happen in Paris as well. And people do play, well, some people play better some weeks. But I mean, that was very damning. And I did think if Sinner was to win, it would just really make a big point that, anyone who won a title or picked up a big win over the last few months, you can't guarantee that you would have done that had Sinner not been suspended. So doesn't matter. You can't take away Casper's title, but I don't think he seemed to be too bothered by it, because I think he thought he was just playing, too well. But at the same time, I don't think you should settle for that when you are a Masters champion now.
Do you think Ruud, that was a bad day at the office and he can raise his game to be competitive with Sinner? Or do you think in time for the French Open? Or do you think they're just kind of worlds apart at the moment?
I think to lose love and one from a top 10 player on a clay court, it's unlikely you'll just be served off the court. It's pretty heavy conditions in Rome as well. So I think that's probably a case that if you don't get into it, it can run away from you. I do think he can be a threat. I do think on Grand Slams in big moments, Casper does turn up. He's made Slam finals. He's caused upsets in the past. I think probably it was just a case that one person really got off at the races and the other one was still in the blocks.
Yeah, I mean, spare a thought, guys, for Tommy Paul, because he reached the semi-finals in Rome, lost to Sinner in a bit of a topsy-turvy match, but he has had quite a stressful week, according to news reports, because he's had his truck repossessed.
This was the big news story. Forget Sinner and the Pope.
I mean,
Tommy Paul and his truck.
Yeah, he's he was the 11th seed here. He's not, short of a few bob, I would say, but he hasn't been making his payments for his truck, and it was taken back by the truck people. And he's called it his baby, and he has had to splash out $1,000 to get the vehicle back. So maybe a bit of mismanagement then, because I would have thought he would have had that money, but I don't know the ins and outs of his finances.
He was playing tennis like his truck depended on it, particularly in that first set against Jannik Sinner. I was sort of wondering how big are these payments? Because he's been doing well over the last few seasons.
Why doesn't he just buy the truck? Is also my question.
How big is the truck?
Yeah, like he's on a payment plan. I think maybe he was told about the truck after he won that first set, and then he, got bageled in the next set against Jannik Sinner. Because we have many questions. He's not answered all of them, but all we know now is that I think he's getting his truck back. He has made enough, Joel, hasn't he, to secure the truck?
Yes, I think he's got the truck back. And if I'm in the Tommy Paul coaching camp, this is definitely going to be a motivational lever I am using. If the Tommy Paul hype train is or he's not quite performing, I'll be like, just think of the truck. Just think of the truck.
No win, no truck, Tommy.
No win, no truck.
Sounds like a kid's toy, doesn't it? Tommy's truck.
Tommy and his truck. Bless.